a lot of spots in between, I was on 18, a lot of spots where water was ponded, and then it started flowing, get through some road pipes. I even seen a couple, looks like some tile that started in the water. Along 18 there.
You want this minimized or you want left up, you can watch it?
It doesn't matter to me, you can minimize it, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't.
It'll-
It'll run in the background.
I don't need to see myself.
Yeah, that's all good.
And it's basically still going 6:30. Slip out our side door. Here's what it is.
Hey, how's it? Good.
Jim, this is Steve Stricker, and I'm a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission, is also a member of the Board of Adjustment. Here's some of the same information that I mailed, but I'll just figure it out for you. And then you know Dave there, so just go ahead and take a seat somewhere and we'll go from there.
Have a little bit. Half those seats were full when I got there.
There's Mark. How you doing, Mark? Good. You know Steve Stricker by any chance? Hey, Steve, we live around West End. Okay. And Mark is by St. Benedict. Okay, south.
Other side of me then.
East of St. Benedict. You know, Dave, here's some information. That's Jim Heldorfer's a new member. Mark. Jim is from Bancroft. Mark is, you the son? Bill's son? Yeah. You look like him.
Is that a compliment?
40 years ago, when I was in the cattleman board with him, you.
Yeah.
That's what you do now.
It's on their own time.
All right.
Oh, I got it. Remember. Yeah. 5 or even 4.
They call it
Two, I sent 2 searches.
a little more amplified.
30 and 10.
Yeah.
Been doing that for
Yeah.
10 years. 10 years now.
That's not, it's not showing up, so I'm coming in.
Dave.
I'm both.
No, that's why I was like, good. I'm just for Josh, this is that.
Be good. That is the gravel.
It appears that they are. Got about. Is that a fence?
Then I'll say, yeah.
I don't think so.
She saw it.
I'm just.
The one that's showing is this side. Oh, that's a good page.
Well, our land.
Dave or Jim, would one of you guys speak just to see if that thing is working? that owl, just say something.
Sure, is Brian supposed to show us?
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Dave's talking when it goes over to him.
Yeah, but it's that. That's not it.
Can you hear me?
Probably can, but I don't think it's fair.
I'll probably.
Well, I think that, no, I'm not recording or anything. But when they talk, one's on my side, one's on there, but
But you'll have the hands full of all, so it won't be caught.
Hey, guys.
Yeah, they're definitely not fair, they're not.
I stop my meeting.
Proposal, okay. Yeah, you don't know, I talked to great talk one last summer. That it was gonna go through a bunch of the fields. Page 9.
So I think the work is when Dave was talking and I was talking, we had.
Is it okay now?
Thank you.
You want to mention it to them now? I mean, we only got a couple minutes.
Figure out that deeper. Pay for my computer.
I know. Well, that will be done this year, but they, yeah, yep.
I read this stuff 2, 3 times, and 12 hours later, I forgot.
You know what I did?
I read.
I did the old, college cheat thing and I highlighted the important stuff, which I just, that's that we. We worked well. Thanks. You. That's good. Have you been down there?
No, I just, I thought. Plus, like, flavor, you actually on now.
We still have. Same thing, we got it. Great singers we ever had, same thing, what we got. School down, we're doing.
Put it on the phone, I think we did it quick. Thanks.
How are you?
We're gonna go to next, if this isn't big enough.
It's filling up, isn't it?
Okay.
Up above, is that bigger, I don't know.
I bet it is.
It's been
Yeah,
a
yeah.
long time since I've been up there.
Oh, man, that goes back to, I was on the sheriff's reserve for 20 years and we used to have our units up there.
I was not sure I ever got in there, but it was just really dizzy.
I was up
I never
there
got
jury
followed.
duty once, yeah.
What's that?
I'd never even heard of it since I got pedigree.
What's that?
I was pedigree. There's like 7 or 6 places, and I was the one that didn't get on. And we said, you know, what's pedigree? Has something to do like if the county had to own something in the sheriff department, something that to do with the county. Like I said, I never got kicked when out the door and never heard any more about it.
I've been called to come down here for, twice, I think, but that was 20-some years ago. The last 2 times we've been on call, but we got.
Yeah, she might fill it.
I think we're fair enough.
There's probably, let's see, 25, 30.
I don't know. We're done, so I don't.
Yeah.
So we're all set up in here. Honestly, I don't know where there's. I don't even know if we would have access to
I
that.
don't know if you would either, and I don't know if they would even hold it.
I know that would, you were talking about the next year's fiscal year, but.
I'd have to double back. I knew there'd be a crowd. I didn't know it'd be quite this big.
Now,
Sit here and I'll get you another seat, Tim.
Eric's not here this year.
I know.
He told me this morning and he said, I can't hear it.
Well, that's why. People still coming in there.
Kyle? Nope, I'm Mark Stevens.
That's Kyle right there.
Here you go.
Okay.
Yeah, you're Kyle.
Nice to meet you. I'm Elizabeth. I'm with Aller. I'm with Tim.
I'm Dave Ross.
Hi.
Mark Student.
Nice to meet you, Elizabeth Burnett. Elizabeth Burnett.
That comes again.
Oh, yeah.
Good, Brian, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you talked about that. I got another meeting to do. How many are in the hallway, Brian? Yeah.
Brian.
What's that? How many are in the hallway?
Quite a
few. How many?
Yourself, but they're still coming up.
Yeah,
I had a problem just finding a parking spot.
Oh, you did?
It took me a while.
You know, I parked on a sloppy out here and I didn't think that, and I will be having people there. Probably have a ticket to that college. I mean, this is where it was advertised, so I don't know how you want it.
But there's still time to come in.
Yeah.
Oh, Doug today. The only thing he said on this was on the back page, there somebody wrote a letter that signed. That is yellow, it has to have to be red, but if he's wanting to.
Yeah, I kind of, those are some things that just come to my head,
Yeah.
you know, so. I don't know if we had a chance to talk to him or meet him yet.
I just shook his hand just a second ago. So there is a written comment that was.
There was one in clear at the end, and
I will, we'll read that.
Do you want me to read it? Do you want to read
yeah,
it?
I received these two letters. Nancy, yeah, I received these two letters to the planning and zoning commission here today. They're more going through everything. I don't know if you want me to read these or. I just up to you.
Well,
Addressed to the-
they were to be submitted by.
Right.
last Friday. It's technically they're like.
Yeah, but there's still,
Internet.
yeah, I'll just give them you guys. You guys hear.
That's me.
Not
Figure I can keep things rolling.
Understood.
All right, at 5 o'clock, folks. Doug, are we gonna try and wait for more people or I got 5 o'clock. I'm ready to roll if anybody else is.
Go.
Okay, do I have a gavel?
Here you are. Sorry.
No worries. Okay, it's after 5 o'clock. In fact, I show it's 5:01. I'm gonna call this meeting to order this evening. This is the Cassuth County Planning and Zoning Commission. The first item on our agenda after calling it to order is to approve our agenda. We have 8 items on our agenda. I seek a motion to approve the agenda.
Also move.
Thank you, Dave.
I'll second it.
Second by Mark. So there's been a motion, and a second to approve the agenda for February 27th, 2023. All in favor signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we've approved the agenda. The next item on the agenda, I guess at this point, I'd like to just make a general announcement. This meeting is being recorded by both video and audio. So we'd request that people be cognizant of that. And if there is to be any speaking tonight, that you come forward to the podium, that only one person speaks at a time. If you have not done so, I'll remind you to sign in at the table near the entrance. At this point, I'll introduce the Planning and Zoning Commission, and I'll just have you indicate your name and where you're from. And we'll start over here.
Jim Hellbrecher, Bancroft, Iowa.
All right.
Dave Rock, Sway City, north of Sway City.
And I'm Brian Toole from Whittemore.
Mark Studer, south of Wesley.
Steve Stricker, West Bend.
Thank you. Next, I'll introduce Mr. Tim Whipple. And if you want to just say where you're from and why you're here.
My name is Tim Ripple, with the Allers and Cooney Law Firm from Des Moines. And we've been retained by the supervisors to help advise them and work through some of the legal issues with the proposed ordinance. This is my colleague Elizabeth Burnett, who's here assisting today.
Thank you.
I think we need to speak up. Difficult to hear back here.
All right. Are you able to hear me? Somewhat? Okay, I'll be a little louder then.
It's advertised for this room. I do not know what.
I'll speak up as much as I can. And so the next item on our agenda is to approve the minutes. I'm sorry, is the election of officers. I'm currently serving as a chair. I've been in that position for quite a few years now. Dave Rock has been the vice chair. At this point, I guess amongst the people here at the board, I will open nominations for the chair.
I moved to leave it the way it is. whatever that's called.
Okay. And is that a dual motion for both the chair and the vice
Yes.
chair?
Vote.
All right, so there's a motion on the floor to remain the way it is, which would be I would stay as the chair, Dave would stay as the vice chair. Dave, do you accept that position if elected?
Sure.
All right, and I will accept the nomination also. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Steve. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, I'll move forward with a vote. All in favor of the motion on the floor, please indicate by stating aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. We've successfully had an election of officers for 2023. Now, item 4 is approve minutes of the previous meeting. Those meeting minutes have been previously submitted to each of you via email. You've had a chance to review those. Do we have any comments, additions, or corrections to the minutes that have been forwarded to you from the previous meeting? And incidentally, that meeting date was April 13th of 2021. Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Also move.
Thank you, Dave. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Mark, all in favor signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we've successfully approved the minutes of the April 13th, 2021 meeting of the Cassuth County Planning and Zoning Commission. At this point, we're in the on the agenda to open up the public hearing. Prior to doing that, again, a few comments. If you wish to speak either for or against, it doesn't matter. We're going to allow anybody that wants to have their words said be heard. However, we'll remind you that it is being recorded. So we'd like you to introduce yourself, identify your name, and to speak as clearly as possible. Having said that, I'll need a motion to open the public hearing.
I'll move.
All right, Steve, we got a motion. Thank you. Okay, thank you. And we've got a motion and a second. All in favor of opening the public hearing, signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we're officially opening the public hearing on the proposed amendment addressing the regulation and restricting the use of land for the transport of hazardous liquid through hazardous liquid pipeline. As you may or may not know, Summit Carbon Solutions and Navigator Heartland Greenway LLC have applied to the Iowa Utilities Board for a permit to construct a carbon dioxide sequestration pipeline across Iowa and through Cassuth County. The Cassuth County Board of Supervisors has directed us, the Planning and Zoning Commission, to review and evaluate a proposed amendment to the Cassuth County zoning ordinance. The ordinance would regulate and restrict the use of land for the transport of hazardous liquid through hazardous liquid pipelines. At this hearing, we, the Planning and Zoning Commission, will be listening to everyone's comments about this suggested ordinance to amend the current planning and zoning ordinance. Copies of this proposed ordinance are available at the table near the door if you wanted a copy. Also, I believe you posted those online at the Cassuth County website, public notices. And so if you haven't had a chance to see it, I apologize, but we have tried to make it as public as possible. At this meeting, if you didn't know, we're not taking any action tonight. We're simply going to hear what the public has to say about the proposed amendment. With that regard, I would ask you to restrict your comments to issues related with the ordinance that has been presented. I mean, if you're for or against a pipeline, that's fine, but we're here today to talk about the ordinance amending the Cassuth County Planning and Zoning Ordinance. Mr. Whipple, do you have any additional comments that you'd like to bring forward at this time before I allow anybody else to have a word?
Would you like me to provide a summary of the ordinance?
Yes, please.
I'll go through this at a high level, and I'll direct my comments to those of you on the commission. Please stop me at any point that you have a question. I know you're gonna hear from the public, and I'm sure you're gonna hear some strong opinions on both sides of the issue. But I'm here to answer your questions about what the ordinance does and what it doesn't do. And in order to help you provide your recommendation and report to the supervisors, as far as your thoughts on what they propose, which is your duty under the Iowa Code. Okay, they have the final say in what the ordinance does, but you have an obligation to consider the public's comments and craft your report accordingly based on your findings. So the ordinance amends your existing zoning ordinance. It's not a standalone ordinance. And some counties have adopted standalone ordinances. Some people don't understand that a pipeline ordinance fits into an existing land use regulation scheme. Yours does. And so if you've ever looked at it, you may have, you guys have a very well done ordinance. It happens to be from the 70s, but it's very well designed and put together. And so we've taken a look at your comprehensive plan, your existing zoning ordinance, and we have taken a framework that other counties are using, but we've adapted it to the specifics of Cassuth County. So we go through on the first couple pages of this ordinance. There's a number of clauses that start with whereas. And so it reads like a contract or resolution, other formal legal documents. And it's making a series of findings, legislative findings, findings of fact that identifies authority, legal authority in regard to this area of the law. It's important for you to understand what a county is empowered to do in this area and what a county isn't empowered to do. And it's clear that at the federal level, the Department of Transportation and the Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, which we sometimes call PHMSA, it's clear that they have jurisdiction over safety standards. It's clear that in Iowa, at the state level, the Iowa Utilities Board has the control over the grant of eminent domain. And so a county doesn't control either of those two things in this area. But we have looked at this issue, and it is our opinion that counties do have the right to regulate land use for these types of projects, as they do other types of land use in the county. So as long as the ordinance that you develop stays out of state and federal jurisdiction and sticks to the traditional authorities of counties with regard to land use, comprehensive plans, and zonings, then there is some action that you can take to protect existing uses, protect economic development, protect property taxes, all the traditional concerns that you have as a zoning commission. And so this ordinance represents a significant attempt to further those goals, okay? And so a lot of the first 4 pages recite some of that. It's a long read and it's really exciting. So take your time, enjoy it, read it a couple times. In all seriousness, it provides an important basis for what you might call the real regulations that follow it, okay? So it goes through some of the issues that have happened elsewhere in the country with pipeline incidents that have happened and the problems that developed in response to those incidents. And an important part of this ordinance is a request for information so that your emergency management teams know how to respond. So that they know where the pipeline is, they know where the people are in relation to it, that they can begin to help people evacuate if that's needed. Your emergency management teams need that information in order to prepare their response. It's important to note that you shouldn't be trying to dictate the company's response or their plans, but just ask for the information that they have to help you plan your response. So the ordinance does that. It attempts to set setbacks of various distances, and that's probably the most important thing for you to consider. The ordinance that you have in front of you creates a framework, has certain features, and it creates an application administrative process. It defines who needs permits and what for. So pipeline companies need permits in order to get through the zoning process. But landowners would need permits before they sign easement agreements with the pipeline companies. And the reason for that is that if you don't take an interest as a county in what the private parties are agreeing to, they may agree to a pipeline location across the land that doesn't meet your setbacks. And then you haven't really achieved the goals that you're setting for preserving land use. There's particular situations arise with zoning that you want to think about as zoning commissioners. So if one person has a pipeline crossing their land, they're in easement negotiations with the pipeline company. They're the ones who have the say over the line location. But there could be someone who lives on the other side of the street, even closer to the line than the person negotiating the pipeline. And who protects their interest in that negotiation? Well, they're not a party to it. And so the function of zoning is for you to set setbacks to try to mitigate that situation for the people in the county. That's the health and general welfare. That's the police power that counties have.
So, Mr. Whipple, if I could, I'm referring now to, the separation requirements in 25.4. I don't know what page it is, but roughly about 7 or 8 pages back. So, for example, from city limits, it says not less than 2.5 miles. So if I understand that correctly, the pipeline couldn't be within 2.5 miles of any city within Cassuth County if this ordinance were to be put in place.
Unless it would obtain an exception or a variance from the Board of Adjustment, which your zoning ordinance allows today, and which is common practice in zoning.
All right, and then
The supervisors had proposed that be at least the default distance of protection so that cities can grow.
And that was kind of my follow-up question, because you have, like, for example, churches and schools, hospital, not less than 1.5 miles, public park, 1/2 of a mile, occupied structure, no less than 1/2 mile. Are those distances that have been determined either by other states and counties, or where did you come up with those setbacks?
Each county is able to set those distances for themselves. They need to think carefully about those distances, and they need to identify, a good basis for them. Some counties have taken a recommendation from their Board of Public Health. There are some studies in the public domain about what safe distances are. And so the Shelby County Board of Health recommended 1,000 feet when it took a look at 2 of the public domain studies, split the difference between the 2 of them and recommended 1,000. In Bremer County, I think they were studying the response to the Satarsha, Mississippi incident and noted that, that was a situation of about 1/2 mile. And so they chose 1/2 mile. I would consider these distances to be in pencil. The supervisors may change them, you may change them, or recommend changes to them, I should say. They're not set in law either at the federal or state level. They're setback requirements that you determine based on the use of land in your county and that you determine a basis for. Either because you've taken a look at public domain studies or because people in the community at this public hearing recommend it. That's certainly something in your report that you may make recommendations on.
And so, in other words, the setbacks you have stated here are within the realm of reason. In other words, they haven't been tested to be unreasonable, put it that way.
No court has ruled them unreasonable.
Thank you. Okay.
The ordinance takes a certain order. So I'll go quickly through it, starting after all of the whereas clauses. There's a line, an important dividing line in the ordinance that says, now therefore be it enacted. Everything after that is no longer a whereas clause or a finding of fact. It's an actual amendment to your zoning ordinance. And so after the ordinance is passed, you would need to take these changes that are laid out in this ordinance and incorporate them into the correct places in your very thorough existing zoning ordinance, right? Okay, so think of them as amending certain things that already exist in the zoning ordinance. So section 1 of the amendment is a text amendment to Article 3 general provisions of the zoning ordinance. It adds a new section to Article 3. It adds section 3.15. You see that? And it is establishing a use class, type or class of use for hazardous liquid pipelines. It defines what hazardous liquid pipelines are, and it's more than carbon pipelines. Uses the same definition that state code uses. So if an oil pipeline would come through the county, it would be subject to these requirements.
So let me ask you this, if we didn't make these amendments and we just left the code the way it is, would we have any control at all over these pipelines?
That really depends on each county's existing zoning regulations. And typically, counties have, and I believe you do as well, a general restriction that says all land in the county must be used according to the zoning ordinance. And in that requirement, it also typically says you have to use it according to the district that the proposed use is in. Then you divide your county into districts. You will have agricultural districts, industrial districts, maybe a floodplain district. And you then make a list in each district, the types of uses that are permitted without a permit, the lists that are not allowed at all, or those that are allowed with a permit. And chances are, in almost every county, and I believe it's the case in this county as well, your ag district doesn't allow an industrial use as of right. Pipeline is an industrial use. It therefore already needs a permit under the existing ordinance. But your ordinance doesn't set out specific terms and conditions for that use. So if a pipeline company needs to get an existing zoning ordinance, the Board of Adjustment would consider a request for a permit or an exception or a variance, as the case may be. But they would have no guidance from either the commission or the supervisors as to what terms and conditions should be imposed on the permit.
For example, the setbacks.
For example, the setbacks.
Okay.
And they might choose 1,000 feet instead of 2.5 miles, or they might choose 2.5 miles instead of 1,000. Iowa code gives Board of Adjustment the exclusive authority to do exceptions, variances, and special use permits. So if you haven't set forth in an ordinance what you want the terms and conditions of your use to be, it'll be up to the Board of Adjustment to determine it when it considers the permit. Now, I should tell you, the pipeline companies have so far asserted that they do not need any zoning permits. So there's a point of contention typically between counties and the pipelines who are building the projects, okay?
So I guess it's a benefit. We have something on the books then saying they need a permit, right?
The best interpretation of your current ordinance is that it already requires a permit. Unless it's preempted by state or federal law, and those are the arguments that are already being made in federal court.
Okay.
Section 2 is another text amendment to Article 23. And it makes some changes to the language I referenced a minute ago, makes some updates for it to the generally applicable, as in applicable to all conditional use permits, not just pipeline permits, all conditional use permits. It updates some language for you, we think, for clarity and better applicability, no matter what type of conditional use permit is being applied for at the Board of Adjustment. So that would affect more things than just a pipeline. It's not specific to pipelines. That's section 2 of the part of the ordinance. Sorry. Section 3 handles some renumbering. We need to make a little space in your zoning ordinance for the pipeline, which is a substantial new addition. So we're giving it a new article, and then it's gonna renumber the articles that follow. So that's a housekeeping amendment. Section 4 is, if you will, where all of the marbles are. It's the new Article 25 for hazardous liquid pipelines. And then it lays forth the purposes of the ordinance and the changes to the regulations. Sets forth the definitions that apply, which to the greatest degree possible are consistent with state and federal code. At 25.2, it creates a conditional use class specific for hazardous liquid pipelines. No matter which district they're in, the same set of regulations apply. This is an approach in zoning that's typically taken with signs, for example, or with solar panels. They tend to have the same restrictions applied to them regardless of which district they're present in. 25.3 sets forth a requirement to get a conditional use permit and imposes that requirement both on landowners before they sign the voluntary easement and on the pipeline companies before they begin construction. 25.4 sets forth the separation distances or setback requirements. 25.5 sets forth the specific requirements that apply to pipeline companies, which are different than the requirements that apply to the landowners. 25.6 says what landowners are required to do to get a conditional use permit. There may be fees. You don't have to have application fees. Kind of depends on what you do as a county today with conditional use permits. Sometimes there's a $50 application fee for a permit. Those amounts are up to you depending on what your costs are. If it's 50, 100, 150, 0. Just depends on what you want to do in terms of what you think it costs your staff time to process the permits. That's the fees and assessments. Other than an application fee, the main burden on the landowners is to comply with the setbacks. And so when they apply for the conditional use permit, they come to the Board of Adjustment with a proposed line location crossing their property. And the work of the zoning administrator would be to verify that that location complies with the setbacks that the county has set. Okay. 25.8 sets forth some public hearing requirements. There's not a public hearing requirement for each individual landowner's conditional use permit, but there is a public hearing requirement before the pipeline company is issued a permit. That gives just like tonight, gives the public a chance to appear at a public hearing and give their thoughts on it at the Board of Adjustment. Not before the commission, but before the Board of Adjustment, because the issue at that time would be the issuance of a conditional use permit. 25.10 has some applicability language. So this does not reach back retroactively and attempt to change the terms of any easements already signed or recorded, but it would apply to easements negotiated or proposed to be signed after the effective date of the ordinance. .11 sets forth the information required to provide the emergency management agency in this county the information it needs to plan its own response. There are a lot of items under that requirement. 25.12 addresses abandonment and removal. And it kicks in after the pipeline is no longer jurisdictional with the federal government. It's intended to give some authority to the landowners to decide what they want to happen at that point, whether they want pipeline to remain in place and not be disturbed in order to not have it dug up and disrupt crop yields again, and leave it in the ground, or whether to dig it up, not have a rusting pipe sitting on their property. It attempts to deal with that situation. What happens to the pipe once the pipeline is no longer in use and no longer being regulated as a hazardous liquid pipeline, that's just rusting infrastructure, what happens? That is 25.12.
Is, this whole section all new language? Section 25,
All of section 25 is brand new. It does not exist in your zoning ordinance today.
okay,
We get to the very last page. You return to section 7, 8, 9, and 10, different numbering scheme. That's again the numbering of this ordinance, not the numbering scheme of the zoning ordinance, which is a 25. So this ordinance has some standard provisions like a lot of contracts have, a lot of ordinances have standard provisions for repealing conflicting ordinances, severability, effective date. And then we noticed that the version of your zoning ordinance that's on your website has been retyped, we think, from this document. Has a few changes and Scrivener's errors that could be corrected, so we've included a non-substantive corrections provision in the ordinance that would make it clear any changes that would be made to that typed document would be authorized as part of this ordinance. So these are housekeeping provisions. So that's the proposed ordinance at a high level.
Thank you.
I'll take any questions, or if you've already asked them, I'll let you get on with the meeting.
Does the board have any questions for Mr. Whip? Okay. We'll continue on with our public hearing. At this point, traditionally, we see if there has been any comments submitted prior to the hearing tonight, because there was the ability to submit comments in writing to our zoning administrator, Doug Miller, prior to today. And it's my understanding that we did in fact receive a letter or comment, and I'll have Doug present that at this point.
Yes, it's to the Cassuth County Planning and Zoning Commission. Carbon dioxide is an asphyxiant that displaces ambient oxygen, making it more difficult to breathe. Smaller exposures cause coughing, dizziness, and panicky feeling called air hunger. As CO2 concentrations get higher and exposure times longer, the gas causes a range of effects from unconsciousness to coma to death. Summit and Navigator are proposing to install hazardous CO2 pipelines in Cassuth County. Summit likes to talk about the millions of miles of pipeline in the United States without mentioning that there are currently only 5,000 miles of CO2 pipelines. How safe are CO2 pipelines? Denbury is a company that currently has CO2 pipelines. In 2007, Denbury built its 31-mile Delta CO2 pipeline to connect Tinsley to the Jackson Dome, an extinct volcano under Jackson, Mississippi. In 2009, Denbury extended the Delta line 77 miles to Louisiana's Delhi field. In 2007, Denbury had a blowout in Mississippi, one requiring the evacuation of local homes in Amite, excuse me if I pronounce that wrong, Amite County. Another underground CO2 blowout at Delhi field in 2013 lasted for more than 6 weeks and contaminated the air with unsafe levels of both CO2 and methane. Tinsley itself suffered a sizable CO2 blowout in 2011, where injected CO2 explodes out of the ground along with water, mud, and drilling fluids. That blowout took 37 days to bring under control, sickened one worker, and killed deer, birds, fish, and other animals. It was just after 7 p.m. on February 22nd, 2020, when residents of Satartia, Mississippi started smelling rotten eggs. Then a greenish cloud rolled across Route 433 and settled into the valley surrounding the little town. Within minutes, people were inside the cloud, gasping for air, nauseated and dazed. Some 24 individuals were overcome within a few minutes, collapsing in their homes at a fishing camp on the nearby Yazoo River in their vehicles. Cars just shut off since they need oxygen to burn fuel. Drivers scrambled out of their paralyzed vehicles, but were so disoriented that they just wandered around in the dark. A CO2 pipeline over a mile from Sartatia had ruptured. In the end, 47 people were treated at a local hospital. Due to the heroics of EMS people and their sheriff's office, no one died, but several are disabled for life from inhaling the CO2 gas. The Denbury pipeline is very short compared to the miles of pipeline planned by Summit and Navigator. Summit is partnering with over 30 ethanol plants over 5 states for their pipeline. The largest chunk is in Iowa with over 2,000 miles. While Denbury's pipeline is point to point, Summit and Navigator's pipeline will have multiple sources of input. Summit and Navigator both claim it is safe, even though no one has done a CO2 pipeline project of this scale before. PHMSA, the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, announced after the GASA at Sartatia, Mississippi, that they will issue new rules to regulate CO2 pipelines. Instead of waiting for new safety regulations, Summit and Navigator are pushing to install the pipeline with the current inadequate regulations. Safety is not priority for either company. The number one concern for them is making money, profits over lives. I urge the zoning board to support the Cassuth County Hazardous Pipeline Ordinance to save lives, protect our health, and preserve our land. And that's from Nancy Erickson, Algona, Iowa.
Thank you, Doug. Had you received any other comments?
I received some letters that I will be passing out to the board
Okay, and it's my understanding
today.
those letters were just received today, and so they were outside the timeline for
Correct.
submission. All right. Okay, at this point, does anyone here in our audience wish to have any comments?
I'd like to ask the lawyer a question.
You may, please come forward to the podium, and you'll first announce yourself, of course, and speak clearly.
Right up front here.
Okay, section 25.
I'm sorry, your name
Oh, Jim Maddox.
and your last name spelling?
Maddox, Mattox.
Very good.
Okay, I believe, according to my reading of this 25.41, that's unenforceable. And I'd like to hear the attorney's idea how we can enforce other counties to do anything. That's what it sounds like. I did.
So your question is in reference to the minimum separation distances
No, below that,
at 25.41.
25.41, but this requirement applies to cities and other counties if the proposed pipeline is located in the county.
And you have a question about that?
How can you apply anything to other counties?
Very good.
It's a good question, and I can see where the gentleman takes his reading from. There's not an attempt to assert jurisdiction outside of Cassuth County. But if a pipeline would choose a route through Cassuth County that comes within a distance of an incorporated city that's in another county, it's saying we can consider as Cassuth County the fact that a city in Emmett County or another county nearby is within our setback. You know, we would want you to avoid that town too and choose another route through our county to stay at least that far away from some other county's city.
So in other words, in an example, I'm thinking of West Bend is kind of on the county line between Cassuth and Palo Alto County.
Correct.
So to the extent part of West Bend and Palo Alto County would be close to the pipeline, we'd want that to be applied as well, the setback.
Correct. And if, for example, a part of West Bend went over into the other county, sometimes that happens, cities straddle the county lines. you may want to say our setback, if the pipeline is on our side of the county line, we want it to be 2.5 miles from every city, even if that city is on the other side of the line. You don't have to have that. That's a feature that, you can change if you'd like. If you feel uncomfortable measuring distances from cities and other counties, you could make a change to, you could make a recommended change to supervisors for that. It's a good question.
Mr. Maddock, did that answer your question?
I understand.
Okay,
There's one other thing, and that was in one part, I'm having trouble finding it now. It said the distance was 2 miles from the city, and then this says 2.5 miles, so it looks like a contradiction. I can't find it now, so.
It looks like we may have changed one part of the ordinance and not the other. So,
So the 2 mile is incorrect.
um,
I believe it says not less than 2.5 miles.
the actual setback language you've chosen is 2.5 miles. Many counties are choosing 2 miles. So we can change one or the other so that they both read the same for you before the final version.
Thank you, Mr. Whipple. Thank you, Mr. Maddock. Is there anyone else that has a comment, question, or would like to speak this evening? Yes, ma'am. Please come forward to the podium and announce yourself.
I strongly urge that you guys do something with the ordinances. The setbacks. This pipeline is proposed to be 300 feet from our house. We have livestock. There's no safety guidelines out there yet. There's no safety studies that we've been told. And I worry about our safety at 300 feet. Safety equipment, you know, if there's a rupture, I'm in that hot zone. No one's coming to get me. No one. My friends and families that are responders are gonna sit there as I die, along with my family. So I strongly urge you to do some setbacks of some sort to protect the citizens of this county.
Thank you, Ms. Ludenthal. Another comment, sir?
Yeah.
Please stand.
Give the of the other, where it says 2 miles. That's a 2502. Okay, so one or the other has to be changed.
Right, we're in agreement with that. Other comments, concerns, questions, statements?
My name is Michael Haley, and I would just like to, if you read the name of the person that sent that letter.
Nancy Erickson.
And I would just like to show everybody stand up that approves and stands in solidarity with Nancy's letter, because I wholeheartedly agree with that. Also, at the same time, well, who stands in solidarity with her plight? Just wanted to have that, show that vote. Thank you.
Appreciate your comments. Yes, sir. Come forward.
Hey, Pedro from Lakota. I see on, let's see,
And sir, how do you spell your last name?
just like the weather, WINTER.
Okay,
On 2544, half a mile from any occupied structure. I own a half mile right across the asphalt plant, my house in the middle of it. Like 40 mile that way, 40 mile that way. What are you gonna do with it? there's no way to get around my farm without being within a half mile of my house. And I only lived in it for 59 years, so evidently I plan on staying.
So I guess you have a question, and the board's not here to answer questions tonight, but do you have a question perhaps for the attorney, or are you just making a general comment?
Just comment, and you guys can think about it the way, however you want to think. And I kind of guess, since I'm right across the road from them, they're gonna go there. I also guess they're gonna go there because they want to. But that's my personal opinion.
But in any event, the setback as proposed, would not allow them to go to the ethanol plant because your house is within that setback.
You can't go south, my sister lives there. They can't go east, there's somebody lives there.
Okay,
Have they thought of that?
thank you, Mr. Winter. Do we have others? Yes, please come forward.
Copy of the ordinance, but as I was listening, my name is Rhonda Johnson and I'm from Whittemore. I just bought an acreage.
Can you speak
for
up?
my- Yeah,
This Miss Johnson from Whittemore.
Rhonda Johnson from Whittemore, and I just less than a year ago bought an acreage for my granddaughter's horses in Whittemore. And so I have questions. You said no court has ruled them unreasonable yet. Has there been any court rulings? Or
Miss-
does that lawyer speak to?
Mr. Whipple?
There are 3 lawsuits underway against 2 different counties.
That was my second question. Why are you suing? Because other Iowa counties.
I'm not suing counties. Our firm is representing the counties.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Why is your firm suing the other counties?
We're not, we're,
The pipeline, the firm that you represent.
It's Sioux County, they don't represent the pipeline, ma'am.
I'm sorry.
He's not.
People don't represent the pipeline.
He's representing the county.
Sioux County.
Let's just speak one at a time. I think I understand the problem. He represents the counties that are being sued by the pipeline.
The emergency planning, how many pipeline issues have there been to date? And what are the chances? What's the percentage of chance? Has there been any studies done? For what was reflected on the woman's concern?
that's really outside of my expertise. I am not an emergency planner or an engineer. And I would encourage you to direct that question to either the emergency responders in the county or to the pipeline company.
And then do you, as our committee, do you address that with the pipelines? How does that get addressed?
Well, at this juncture, we're considering whether or not to adopt this ordinance to amend our current planning and zoning within the county. So if this board were to recommend it to the county's board of supervisors, then it would be up to them whether or not they would adopt it. If it's adopted, then at that point, the pipeline would have to agree or work within the structure and within the ordinance. So for example, if the setback was a half a mile and they're proposing 300 feet, that wouldn't work. I mean, they have to follow the ordinance if that's what we put into place. But there's a few steps before we get there. Tonight's the public hearing step.
Is there a public vote?
The public vote is when you vote for your supervisors at the county elections. The supervisors represent you within your respective districts.
Thank you.
And Mr. Miller, did you have any additional comment to that or any input that you wanted to make? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Any other comments, statements? Yes, please come forward.
District Supervisor Gail Casey. These setbacks under there is what I brought to the board.
Can you speak up, please?
They're like the half mile from a house. They did a test on an 8-inch pipeline. They blew it on purpose to see what it'd do. At 2,000 PSI, they went 1,300 feet in 4 minutes. A half mile is
640.
2,640 feet.
2,640 feet. So I'm gonna be about a half mile from that pipeline, but for people, that gives you 4 minutes to get out of your house. Like that lady, 300 yard or feet. You got less than a minute. If they can go 1,300 feet in 4 minutes. And as a supervisor, we couldn't stop. These guys cannot stop. They can only look out for the safety of the people. You can't, whether they want it or not, they can't do that. It's only for the safety and the well-being of the people. And all my setbacks I put in here was for the well-being of the people. Because that'll give the people, you know, like this 2.5 miles. I don't think you can evacuate the hospital, but you can get a lot of people out. And the people, like I said, I'm gonna be I live in Irvington. So I'm a half mile, 3/4 mile. The line is straight north of me. And so that gives me, that blows. Because at 2 weeks ago, they were here telling us stuff. They will come and let us know when it blows. Well, if it blew last night at 2 o'clock, okay, I got 8 minutes to get out of my house. You ain't gonna inform me. And like Irvington, if it's straight north of Irvington, we got a anhydrous, we got all chemicals there. So what are you gonna do with that? And so I just wanted to know, because it sounded like, well, you're wondering about the half mile. That's why I threw the half mile out there, because at least it gives us 8 minutes instead of less.
So, Mr. Casey, in your research, does it dissipate before it gets to the half mile, or you're just saying that'll give you enough time?
It could travel that fast. And the pipeline, say, Nancy, how big's the pipeline going through us?
20 inches.
20 inch, sure. So there's gonna be a lot more gas. And they're running 22 to 2,400 PSI, not 2,000 PSI, like that test was running. So it's gonna be a big cloud coming.
So in your research of the half a mile, for example, I mean, are there longer distances, like a mile, for example, of setbacks?
Because I know they told us that if you went too far, it sounds like you're trying to stop projects, so you want to try to have the safety of the people. That's why I put a half mile in there, but I did 2.5 miles from the city limits, basically because our hospital is sitting right on the city limit and our schools. At least that gives them time to get the kids. If it blows, they can head them north, get them on the bus and get them out of here. But, so like I said, I just wanted to say why the half mile radius was.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
So we have another comment. Come forward, please.
County here. I'm Stacey Besh. I live here in Algona. And I just want to talk really quick, just a few statements, really about safety. People choose to live in Cassuth County because it's safe. It's safer than cities. People move here because of the whole people that we can congregate together and have that safety feeling. That's why we trust our supervisors. This is why we trust planning and zoning people that get put on these boards for our safety, that you're going to look out for our best interests. We have people like Summit who claim that it's so safe that they would build a house on the pipeline. I would welcome that. I would like to see that. But I also think too, I would like to see the EMS come in front of this board, and I'd ask them, do they feel safe enough to go, that if this blows, that they're willing to go into those hot zones? Do they have the equipment to go into these hot zones? If they don't have the equipment and they have to get it, who incurs those costs? Does that cost come back to the county, which then in turn comes back to us property tax owners? Is that who it comes back on? Because that's, you're talking just, it gets unfolded more and more and more. Next thing would be, if they're not willing to go into these hot zones, which most of them are probably not going to go into these hot zones because they're risking their own life to save some other lives, which that's what the EMS of course do. So then the next thing is, when you have all the safety and they say it's not going to blow, it has blown and it will have a rupture. And for them to say, oh no, it won't have a rupture, that's like saying the stock market will never crash, which I'm sure the people in their early 20s thought the same thing. So we need to really keep in mind that when they say it's so safe and there's no way that this is going to blow or it cannot rupture. Nancy Erickson, you did a wonderful job on that letter, dear. That letter explains exactly that it has happened and the possibility of it happening again will happen. We live in safe Iowa. Make us a safe county. Make us feel safe that we can trust you people to look out for the best interests of the lives of us and our future children and grandchildren to live in this community. It is on your shoulders to make sure these ordinances do come into place. And if we can make them larger, of course, I would like to see 100-mile radius is what I would like to see. But because we can't have 100-mile radius because it looks like we're against the pipeline, well, we are against the pipeline. So what would be reasonable? Can we go further?
Okay, so there's been a question, can we go further than
2.5 miles.
for
You
the,
know that we can wipe out, if there's a south wind in the summer, we will wipe out the entire city of Algona. The entire city of Algona will be, we could lose everybody. Are you prepared for that?
and so I guess to some degree, the question I'll refer to Mr. Whipple, could we go more than 2.5 miles from a city?
Without sounding flippant, the answer to the question is as far as the courts will allow. And the answer to that question is, we don't know yet. That issue is being litigated. It's likely to be litigated. Whether counties have the authority to set the assistances at all right now still hasn't been answered. So we have to go one step at a time. And any ordinance that the supervisors adopt needs to be rational, needs to have a rational basis, right? And so the distance you choose for a setback, for any zoning setback, there's got to be some connection to a legitimate public purpose that you have. And at 2 miles, that's a common distance in terms of balancing zoning and development between cities and counties. Very commonly, well, that's actually the statutory distance that a city has to exercise extraterritorial zoning. That's 2 miles. 2 miles is how city utilities and rural water utilities adjust their buffer zones and service territories. So in Iowa, 2 miles is kind of that area of negotiation and jurisdiction between the authority of cities and city utilities and counties. So if you choose a different distance, you just need to be prepared to find some kind of basis to support it. 2 miles has a support in law from an economic development and a jurisdictional standpoint. Beyond that, the question comes down to the courts.
Does that answer your question?
Yep, for the most part, yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Besh. We have another person?
Rich Deal from Algona. Bear with me, but Galen talked about the 8-inch pipe. And my own research, and I'll try to do this the best I can. That's the 8-inch pipeline he was talking about. The European shipment. Is after the erupted, this is part of the eruption, and this signifies this just a little bit better. Everybody can see that in the desk here. Okay, well, that's 8-inch, 20-inch. And so you take an 8-inch pipe and you, let's just say you double it to 16. It's not 2 times, it's 4 times. So take this times 4, but more than that, I guess, if you go to 20. So I did a little driving. You go south of Algona, and I counted at least 8 or 9, depends how you look at it, subdivisions. Correct. I mean, we've all been there and gone that way. Not even counting the splattering of houses. I took a little time and I went to Borough today, and I visited with the lady that her husband wasn't there. They have 40 rooms. They're pretty busy in the summertime. A lot of clientele that can't even speak English. And we're talking about everybody just getting out of time. So you tell me, how from the hospital, you look at 169, they need to get out to us if they can. And I mean, you might not even be able to start the vehicle. We don't all have battery or whatever thing it's going to take. That's the only way to us. They can't go whooping around. They can't go the other way. They can't take 4 or 5 miles. trying to go south, and we're trapped. So I really think, I'm just asking, you know, what would you want? Would you want this picture next to this lady here? Times 4? Where's our common sense? And that's as a board, you know, we're asking you, please, just to consider us, consider the citizens. And that's the neat thing about this law. And maybe Mr. Whipple can go on with this a little bit, but they've given us that option. Let's take it.
Thank you, Mr. Beal. Do we have any other persons that wish to speak? Come forward, please.
Get one more shot.
Hello, my name is Samuel Schrader, and I would like to give credibility to both Mr. Deal's and Gearster's statements. I have a degree in biochemistry, and I did some math and some research as to the effects of what would happen if a pipeline did burst. They say that it's about 2 miles from town. Well, it's not from my house. It's less than half a mile from myself and Mr. Deal's house. And the thing about carbon dioxide, it's heavier than oxygen, it's heavier than nitrogen, it's heavier than what we normally breathe every day. And that means it doesn't behave like a gas, it behaves like a liquid. It flows downhill. And between the hospital that is on 169 in my house, there is a very large valley, which means that if the pipeline is south of town and there is a rupture, and the math that I did was from Summit is about 10,000 tons a day on a 16-inch pipeline. I didn't know the pipeline was 20 inches. I only knew it was 16, which means that it would be more than 10,000 tons a day, which is over 2.3 million pounds of CO2 in a 24-hour period. And as Nancy has stated, it took about over 30 days for them to patch the pipeline, which means that that is the amount of CO2 coming out every day for about a month. And it's going to flow downhill through my neighborhood and into the valley, because that is what liquids do. Or imagine if it was near Sandra Lubenthal's house, 300 feet. If that blows in the middle of the night, we're not talking 2 minutes to get out. You're not even gonna know it. You're gonna go through the stages of something called hypoxia, which is what happens when your brain is deprived of oxygen and you can't think straight. You can't even think to get out the door because you're loopy. It's like you're drunk. It's basically like you're drunk. And then you pass out, and then you slowly lose consciousness, and then you die from lack of oxygen. That's what happens when CO2 displaces all the oxygen in the air. And it will flow through my neighborhood downhill if a pipeline bursts near my house. So I just want to know, how are first responders going to get there in time? And how are they going to be able to evacuate people? Because you can't just slap on a gas mask and filter it out. You have to carry basically a scuba tank on your back in order to get in and get people out of the area. How are people going to be able to escape from that? How are first responders going to be able to get there in time and evacuate entire neighborhoods that are unconscious? Will they have enough oxygen on their backs for that? Is there enough room in the ambulance? That's what I'd like to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Petty. Mr. Winter, we'll have you back for your final comments.
Open up. He said most of the things I was gonna say, but Mr. Casey, if I understood him correct, you have 4 minutes when it blows. I don't know what you guys do, but 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 minutes don't even get me out of bed. I mean, I won't know nothing happens unless the bed's. So what good is 4 minutes? First place, you know, you gotta get out of bed, put people won't clothes on probably, especially in the winter time. Find a vehicle, get somewhere, if you're still, well, like you said, are you still mentally competent to
Your
do
vehicle won't start either. Your vehicle needs oxygen to run.
Yeah.
it? Spread on your ground.
Extra floor in every house.
Okay, do we have any other comments? Yes.
Janice Maury, Algona. I'm opposed to this. If we have first responders that can respond, how many do we have? How many properties need attention? How many ambulances that won't start? East Palestine, Ohio, were they prepared for that? And how was that handled? I went to science or took science classes in grade school and knew you have certain chemicals you don't start a fire to. I'm pretty ashamed of that behavior. I understand that our nearest response team that can handle a catastrophe like that is Mason City.
That's
How fast are they gonna get to us?
Okay, so just for clarification, it's more, you're against the pipeline, but with regard to the amendment that we're here to discuss tonight,
I'm against it totally.
you're against the amendment also?
I'm against having a pipeline run through us. If we amend and move it from the city, what home address is then gonna be affected closer?
Okay. Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Yes, please come forward and to the podium.
I'm not gonna be the most popular man in the room. Tonight, my name is Craig Schoenfeld. The record is SCHOENFELD with Navigator Project. And have, I'll hand out to matter of time on provide the comments for you to look at. And I know you're just taking comments tonight. I'm just going to, what we've done, and I know Mr. Whipple has seen these before. I'll be mindful of time as to not go through everything that I point out, but it's just comments that we have on the ordinance. I know the commission will do its due diligence, the board of supervisors will do its due diligence, and ultimately the county will do, I guess, is what the best interest of your constituents are, and very cognizant of that. That being said, what I've prepared and what I've handed out to you tonight are comments that we have of the ordinance in and of itself. It's not necessarily stating for or against, but on behalf of Navigator, it's one of the things as the various counties, whether it was Emmett a few weeks ago through planning and zoning, Freiburg County is going through their third reading tomorrow. We've done our best to at least try to be collaborative, provide back on these type of ordinances where they come. Generally commenting, as Mr. Whipple pointed out, there is litigation in two counties currently. We are party to one of them in Story County. There's a disagreement of jurisdiction. Certainly, we believe that the issue of preemption comes into play, both the federal and state law, that where it comes to the issues of safety, that's the sole domain of PHMSA and the federal government. When it comes to citing, the Iowa Utilities Board has that control. That being said, as you look through the document that I handed out to you, we've cited, I guess, more or less just questions and points of clarifications that we're as a company asked for you to consider, and perhaps as you do your deliberations, take the opportunity to review some of those questions and what we have raised. You know, a lot of the comments tonight are certainly have been emotional and opinion. We're looking not necessarily for, we don't want to do that. We're just looking for the clarifications from you as a zoning body. You know, one of the things that is often talked about, and as I kind of page through this, we look at, you've got a variety of terms there that we had perhaps questions on some of the definitions. You know, looking just at Reddit at number 25.0 and the purpose is conditions and safeguards. Safeguards, that's an undefined term. What does safeguards mean? So you'll see throughout our comments that we made here, those are the type of things that we as a company are looking for clarification. Ultimately, if we're going to be the ones that are going to be held to permitting standards within the county, what are some of those things that you're looking for? There's also to take into account just general processes of construction of a pipeline and infrastructure of this nature. It's the permitting that goes on with the federal government, the permitting that goes on with the state government, even the permitting that has to happen currently locally, timelines and the like, that are placed in this document. I know there's places where there's allowance for variances or the like. but there's also places where we believe there may be contradictions with how an actual construction of an operation of a pipeline takes place. Those are some of the things that we highlighted in our comments. See, a lot of things, again, talk about some of the timelines. You know, I know the comment was brought up by a gentleman here talking about, you know, city limits and the like. Our plant manager for the Valeros facility in Lakota. That facility is not within city limits, but certainly a lot of our facilities, and I'm assuming other projects facilities are, or at some point in time, could be annexed for tax purposes at some point in time. You know, how do we work with you on variances to be able to access those receipt points? Those are the type of considerations that we bring to you for consideration as you continue your deliberations, as you look towards what you may do in your upcoming meetings and have those conversations. We will be here to answer questions. We're happy to do that. Certainly a lot of the questions brought up tonight regarding safety and studies and the like. It's all part of the Iowa Utility Board process. Before we get a state permit, we have to go through that permitting process. We have to show the studies that are involved and emergency response plans. All those type of things are required by the state at this point in time. And would all be a part of that public, part of that record and deliberations that I know the Summit Project has finally received their hearings. We have not received ours yet, but those are the things that I wanted to raise to you tonight. Have a chance for you guys to review and take a look at that. I don't expect you to pass any judgment on what I'm just handing you for the first time this evening. But, and again, I know Mr. Whipple's very familiar with the comments that we submitted in similar ordinances, so I'm sure he'll be able to help answer your questions as well. But certainly thank you for your time, your opportunity. I appreciate the comments from the public. I know you will certainly take that into account. But thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Figure we might as well go back to back. I have.
Would you please
Oh, sorry.
announce your name first?
I'm Kylie Lang. I'm with Summit Carbon Solutions.
Lange.
Lange.
Miss Lang?
I have some documents I'm gonna give to Doug. I walked him through it. I'm gonna send him an email so you guys can also get some copies that I'll just leave with him. So I'm the Iowa project manager for Summit Carbon Solutions. You know, first and most important, I want to discuss our existing regulations. The pipeline industry is highly regulated at both the federal and state levels. PHMSA, the Pipeline and Hazardous Material Safety Administration, regulates pipeline safety, specifically CO2 pipelines through Title 49 of the Code of Federal Regulation, Part 195. These pipeline safety regulations are rigorous and have been well-tested success through millions of miles of pipeline inspections. At the state level, our project is moving through the Iowa Utility Board process to obtain a state permit before construction can begin. Beyond that, we are also working with the Army Corps of Engineers and the Iowa DNR for intersections with major waterways and sensitive lands. At the county level, we'll obtain permits for crossing roadways and drainage districts, and in total, we'll have over 4,000 permits on this project. The proposed ordinance appears to be significantly aimed at the safety issues and would impose additional local regulations on an activity that the state and federal regulatory regimes already govern and permit. As a result, they are preempted by both state and federal law. We understand that counties have questions and concerns, and representatives from Summit Carbon would be happy to continue to meet with representatives from the county to answer those questions and discuss their concerns. But we do not believe that the ordinance is appropriate as a matter of policy, and more important, we know that it would conflict with both state and federal laws. In all practical aspects, this ordinance would prohibit Summit Carbon Pipeline from going through the county and thus deny farmers and ethanol plants the project's benefit. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Lang. Okay, so we've heard comments on both sides. Is there anybody that has something new to offer concerning specifically the ordinance that's being proposed this evening?
Comment?
Yes, sir. And your name?
Michael McNeil.
McNeil.
I support your concept of this ordinance, although I feel the setbacks may be a little bit weak. But I think I wanted to share with you that there is an alternative to the pipeline. There's a company called Cap CO2, and I just spoke with the CEO a few minutes before coming to this meeting, and they have the ability to set a modular unit into an ethanol plant and capture all of the CO2 and convert it into methanol. We would not need any pipeline. You can set these units, they're about the size of a shipping container. So you can have 1 or 2 units, whatever it takes, depending on the size of the plant. The first of these units are being set up in Southern Illinois, probably around the 1st of April, so 30 days or so from now. They plan to get this started. The University of Southern Illinois is working with this. It is a European company that is bringing this technology. It's brand new technology. Making ethanol in the past has required a lot of electrical usage. But they have a new system using catalysts to require a lot less electricity, making this a very efficient system. It would generate about 3 times the profit for the ethanol companies that the cost of doing this pipeline would be. And we would not have to worry about the safety concerns that I've heard here this evening. I just wanted to make you aware this technology exists, is being set up and established very quickly.
Thank you, Mr. McNeil.
I'm Nancy Erickson. To give you a little bit of my background, I worked at the hospital for 33 years. I was the IT manager there. I've worked with a ton of different software. I listened in in December when IUB had a hearing with Summit where they repeatedly refused to give their plume studies. I am also a member of the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center. We work behind the scenes in the event of a disaster. I am on that. I downloaded software called Aloha. This software is for EMS people to figure out in a chemical spill how far the chemical will spread. This is an example of the software. Yes, this will show you where the people will die. This orange area here is above 40,000 ppm. That's considered immediate threat to life and health. The yellow area is above 5,000 ppm. Emergency responders, firemen do not go into any of those areas, not even the 5,000 ppm. They set up, cordon off all that area. You will notice here where it goes up above 200,000 ppm. That's the zone where my house is, a quarter mile away from the pipeline. If it ruptures, we are dead. There's no coming to save us. There's no chance of saving us. The software also allows you to import it into MARPLOT, and that can show you where it is going. This is assuming it ruptures about a half a mile east of me. In this scenario, nobody is in the kill zone, but there are several families that are in the immediate threat to life and safety. And there's a ton more people: Southdale, Royal Oak, Potterfield, Woodland Hills, Don Teets, Conley Nelson. They are all in the area that will be affected by the 5,000 ppm parts per million. At 5,000 ppm, you're finding it difficult to breathe. You'll have a headache. You'll be fatigued. You can be dizzy and fall down. That's a lot of people to be calling EMS. And I can give you this stuff if you want it. It's also the CO2 temperature I have at 50 degrees. Grant Terry, an employee of Summit, told us, and I have it recorded, the CO2 in the pipeline is gonna be at the ambient temperature of the ground, which is why I ran it at 50 degrees. From what I've read, it's not gonna be that temperature, but I based my studies on what Grant Terry, a Summit employee, said. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions? Anyone else have comments, concerns, questions about this ordinance? We'll have him first, please. Please stand there, and this will be your final comment.
First of all, 2.5 miles. It's really a distance that really doesn't apply. This is a liquid. And it can run down a ditch for 20 miles. As long as it stays concentrated and it's low, just like frost coming down from the sky. Frost comes down from the sky and acts just like water, and it takes out the crops in the valleys. Well, this does the same thing. And one thing that hasn't really been discussed, I don't know if ever has been, but installing a second pipe, like a split pipe around the pressure pipe, and having sensors inside of it, like tire pressure sensors, so that this very second of pressure increases, they can shut off the valves within a certain distance of that pipeline, and then let the gas dissipate inside of the second pipe. That is used just as a buffer, you can have like a 2-foot pipe or a 4-foot pipe, like a gas line pipe, but it would have to be split so you can clamp it over the original pipe. But that could be done with the steel and clamps and all, because it doesn't have to be super perfect, because the pressure will be greatly reduced by being dissipated from a 20-inch pipe into a 48-inch pipe. And that would add a much greater level of safety on containing the gas, which actually is a liquid, from even escaping the pipe. And it would have sensors, so you can know exactly where and when it blows. And I did.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. Mr. Casey, final comment?
Yeah, there's the strength of numbers. And what I was told from those standing over there, if you pass the ordinance that we have for setbacks, Hancock's gonna back us, Wright's thinking about backing us, Palo Alto's gonna back us. We do ours, we got 4 counties right in a row. That means something. So I just wanted to throw that out at you guys.
Thank you, Mr. Casey. Okay. Final comment?
Jan Reagan. And I think it was you that said, after they're done using these pipelines, if you so choose, the farmer can have them dug up, or they can stay there and rust. Aren't they going to be rusting while they're in use? And what happens when you have rust? Doesn't that cause leakage?
Thank you for your comment, Ms. Maury. Okay, any new comments about the ordinance that we're discussing tonight? Yes.
Matt Dornbeer.
Dornbeer, thank you.
I support the ordinance entirely the way it's written at the setbacks at the minimum of where they are right now. Would like to see you guys increase them. You asked earlier if there was any other counties that are doing this. Emmons County, North Dakota, on February 7th, increased their setbacks to 2 miles from city limits and 1.5 miles from established residences and 500 feet from any other buildings. to give you a reference of what some other counties are doing. They want to sell this project as saving ethanol. For California, currently California put a stop on all CO2 pipelines until PHMSA comes out with their new rules. Something to consider. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Lundby. Okay, if we've completed all the public comments, at this point, I guess I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Also move.
We've got a motion from Mr. Stricker. Second, please.
I'll second it.
All right, second from Mr. Rock. All in favor of the motion to adjourn the public hearing, signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're now officially closing the public hearing. The next item on the agenda is discussion with the zoning administrator. That's Mr. Miller.
Yeah, I'm sure that Mr. Whipple and I will be discussing things, and we are going to have to meet again to for further discussion. And from guidance from Mr. Whipple, we will move forward. But until that time, I will, as I did the last time, we'll set up a meeting and we'll advertise for that.
Do you envision that meeting being within the next month, the next 2 months? Do you have a general timeline idea?
I will be sending out an email, I would assume, by the end of this week to see what your schedules are.
Very good.
Any requests from the board as far as getting in, when to have it scheduled as soon as possible? Or would you,
Well, I know farming season usually takes out a few of our board here, so probably before May 1st at least.
okay. No, I would assume yes by May. Definitely, I'm thinking in April, maybe even in March.
Very good.
Early April at the latest.
Yes. Yeah.
Be good.
Okay, very good. Well, we got to speak and move on.
Okay, so that completes our discussions with the zoning administrator. Item number 8, adjourn the meeting. May I have a motion to adjourn the meeting, please?
I so move.
All right, we've got a motion from Mr. Studer. Do we have a second?
Second it.
We'll give this one to Mr. Heldorfer, second, to adjourn the February 27th, 2023 meeting of the Cassuth County Planning and Zoning Commission. All in favor signify by stating aye.
Aye.
The meeting is now adjourned. Thanks, everyone, for attending.
Thanks, guys. At least we know there's interest.
Yeah. Well, Steve?
I will be getting.
You're fine.
Well, the comments presented, we'll get on.
I do not know.